Okay, so I've got a very simple spreadsheet up here, and on this spreadsheet you can see that there is a series of income items, and it's added up into this B9 cell, which adds up the income. Now, what if I said, well, because of my new expense items that are coming in this year, I need to make more than $73,000. I need to get this income up to $81,000. And how much do I have to increase my book selling in order to do that? So obviously this is pretty simple, but just to show you how GoalSeek works. GoalSeek is one of those functions that let you do what-if analysis. So in order to go to GoalSeek, we would go to the Data tab. And on the Data tab, you will see a Data Tools group, which has a number of different tools in it. And one of those tools says What-If Analysis. If I click on What-If Analysis, you see a few different items here, one of which is GoalSeek. So if I click on GoalSeek, it opens up a dialog box, and it asks me what cell I would like to set to a particular value. Because my cursor was already on the B9 cell, it has that there, but if I was in a different cell, it would simply tell me what cell I'm on. So I'm going to say B9, and then I'm going to say I want to set that to 81,000. Okay, and by changing what cell? And I'm going to say the book income cell, so I need to sell more books. If I say OK, it shows me, OK gets me to $81,000, and I have to sell $46,000 worth of books. So I'm going to cancel that so it goes back to the original. And if I wanted to say, well, maybe I can increase my music sales instead, I can go back to What-If Analysis, which is on the Data tab, and to GoalSeek, and I say, okay, I'm going to set that again to a value of 81,000, but this time I'm going to say I want to change my music sales. And when I say okay, again, it's getting me to my desired result, and instead of it's changing the B6 because that's what I told it to do. Okay, so the disadvantage of GoalSeek as a way of finding out what the question is when you know what answer you want is that it only allows you to change one variable. And in the real world, as we know, there are a lot of different factors that can lead to something, so changing one variable might not be the best way to go. So I'm going to open up another little more involved spreadsheet with a more sophisticated formula. This is a payment formula. So this is based on the principal, the interest, and the term. And this is just an amortization schedule for those payments. So let's say I'm buying a car for $30,000 and my interest rate that the bank tells me is 4%, and I'm going to pay for it over 4 years or 48 months. And let's say it comes to this $670 and change, and I say, well, I can't afford that. So I want to modify that. So again, if I go to my Data tab and I go to What If, now I'm getting a little tired to having to go to the Data tab and click on What If Analysis. So what I would suggest is put this on your Quick Access toolbar. So if you right-click on that and you say Add it to the Quick Access toolbar, now it's here. Okay, so you always have access to it. If I do a GoalSeek here and I say set that cell to, let's say, $550, because that's what I can afford to pay. And by changing what cell, well, the one most appropriate to change would be the principal. And I say, okay, so it tells me I can pay $550 a month if I only borrow $24,600. So that's, again, I'm going to cancel that. So it's a little bit more sophisticated here, but still we only have one factor, one different variable that we can modify. So I'd like to talk about a more sophisticated what-if analysis tool, and that is called Solver. And Solver allows you to modify multiple variables and also to set various parameters or constraints on those variables. But Solver comes with Excel, but is not automatically installed when you set up a standard Excel install. So we have to install it. So if you go to your File menu, and you go all the way down to Options, you will get to the various categories of options for the program. And what we need to do is go to the add-ins, because this is an added-in item, even though, as I said, it comes with Excel. And when you go to add-ins, down on the bottom of this dialog box, it'll say Manage Excel Add-ins. And when you say Go, you'll see a choice of several different add-ins. And here's the Solver add-in. That's the one we want to add now. You might also want to take a look at Analysis Tool Pack because that adds additional functions into the finance functions, the date and time functions, the engineering functions, etc. But right now we're talking about Solver. So I'm going to say OK, and it should add another group. Here it is, an Analyze group, to the right end of your Data tab. Okay, so if I go to Solver, it opens up a much more fully featured dialog box, and I'm going to again say I want to set the objective of my monthly payment, which happens to be in F4. And let's say I want to say that, let's say I want to change this to 600. Okay, now the key here is I can change several variables, which makes it a much more realistic way to deal with this, because I might be able to pay a longer term, pay it out in a longer term. I might be able to get a better interest rate, and obviously I can borrow less money if I buy a different car. But if you just tell it to solve like this without giving it any restrictions, it might come up with an answer saying your interest rate is 1%, which is totally unrealistic because you're not going to find anyone to give you an interest rate of 1%. Or it might come up with an answer saying your term is going to be 100 months, which again is unrealistic. So what we want to do is add what they're calling constraints or parameters or limitations. So I'm going to say add a constraint, and first of all on the principal. And I'm going to say, okay, it has to be more than, greater than, or equal to, and let's say I say $20,000 because I can't buy a car that I would want for less than $20,000. That is right. And then I'm going to add another constraint, and this time I'm going to add a constraint to the interest rate. And again, I'm going to say greater than or equal to, and let's say I'm going to say 3.5%. Maybe I can get my credit union or my brother to lend me money at that rate. And then I'm going to say add a constraint on the term in months. And it says the first one is less than or equal to, and I'm going to say 60 because I really couldn't get a car loan for longer than 5 years. And then I'm going to add a constraint again on the term in months to say greater than or equal to, and let's say I say 36. All right, and then when I say OK, I'm going to see all the constraints listed. And it's a good idea just to go through and make sure they make sense. It's very easy to mix up the greater than and less than. I've done it myself. So I'm going to say the D3 is the principal greater than 20,000. The D4 is the percentage greater than 3.5. And the D5 is the term less than 60 greater than 36. So that all makes sense. Notice over here that if I did make a mistake or you wanted to change something, you could change. You could add another constraint. You could delete a particular constraint. You could reset everything. So this allows you to modify. Also notice that instead of reaching a particular value, you could say minimize the answer or maximize the answer. It's just another way to go. And if I say solve, it gives me a solution here, 600. And it kept the 4%, but it increased the term to 50.5, let's say, and it decreased the principal somewhat. So you can keep that solution, or you can restore the original values, which is what I'm going to do. You can also have it create reports for you based on the solution you keep, and you can also have it save as a scenario, which is important because scenarios is the next topic I want to talk about. So I'm going to say restore the original values and say OK, because I wanted to talk about scenarios. Okay. So if I close out of this file, and I'm going to not save any changes. I need to close out of this one as well. Okay. And I have one more file up here, which again is a little more full-featured, but it's pretty simple. I have a company that has a list of different expenses for salary and advertising and office expenses, and that's a sum of the expenses. And I have a list of revenues from different countries, and here's a sum of the total revenues. And here is the profit, meaning I'm just taking the expenses and subtracting it from the revenues. So it's fairly simple. And let's say that I need to increase my profit from 1.2 million to 1.4 million. And I'm going to do that by changing some of my expenses and some of my revenues. So let's say I decide I'm going to increase the advertising, and that's going to increase the revenue in from certain countries. So I'm going to use a solver to do that. So again, I could go to data, and then there's solver all the way at the end. And I'm going to say set this profit cell, which is C13, to a value of 1,400,000, and by changing what variable cells. So the cells that I'm going to change is the advertising, and then also the income from Germany, Great Britain, and the United States. So I've just chosen those. And I'm going to, again, add some constraints. Okay, and then it says that for the advertising, I'm going to say greater than or equal to, and I'm going to increase that to at least 55,000. And then I'm going to add a constraint to the Germany, and I'm going to increase that to, let's say, 300,000. And then I'm going to add a constraint to Great Britain, increase that to greater than or equal to 200,000. And then I'm going to add one for the United States and say greater than or equal to, and I'm going to say 450. And hopefully I'm basing this on some information that I have about the company and what our sales are where our sales are going. And I'm going to say okay. And again, here's my constraints: greater than, greater than, greater than, less than, fine. Greater than, okay, so this I said less than, which is not what I wanted to do. So I made a mistake here, so I'm going to change that. So the C6 should be greater than 300,000. Okay, so now they're all greater than, which is what I want. I don't want to reduce the revenue, I want to increase the revenue. And when I say solve, okay, so it allows me again to keep the solution, to restore the original values. It got to the 1.4 million. And it increased the revenue, but I said greater than or equal to, and it increased some of these even more. I think each one got to be increased more than what I said was at least, and so forth. And again, I'm pointing out that it says save as a scenario because I'm going to do that in a minute. So I'm going to restore the original values here. And then I'm going to say, okay, if I want to have a different scenario to see what would happen if I increased that, did decrease that, or if I did it a different way, that's what I mean by different scenarios. And so I'm going to say in my what if analysis, which I now put on my quick access toolbar, or you have it on your data tab, okay, there's a scenario manager. And the scenario manager lets you add various scenarios. So I'm going to say add a scenario. I'm going to call it, let's say, current info. You could call it anything you want. And if you want to create a little comment and explain what you meant by that scenario, you can. I'm not going to take the time to do that. And again, by changing what cells. So in my scenario here, since I said I'm going to postulate, you know what, first I want to save the scenario as it is right now. So I'm going to say the advertising, and I'm going to say these three, advertising, and I'm going to say these three cells, but I'm not going to change anything. So when I say okay, it gives me the opportunity to change these various cells, but I'm going to say okay, and I'm not changing it. So I'm leaving the current scenario just the way it is now. Then I'm going to add a scenario in which I'm going to change some items. So let's say I say best case. And my best case scenario is to change, let's say I can make changes to any of these, and I can make changes to any of these. I don't have to change them all. And when I say OK, here you get a listing of all of those cells that you said you wanted to base the scenario on. So let's say in the best case, I'm going to take the advertising, which is in C6, and I'm going to spend more on advertising, and then it's going to lead to a lot more income in the places that I'm going to increase my advertising in. So I'm going to say here in Germany, I'm going to increase my income to this, and then here in the Great Britain, I'm going to increase my income to that, and in the United States, I'm going to increase my income again. And I'm going to say, okay. So now I've created a best case scenario. And if I say, show me that, I want you to watch what's happening over here on the screen. It's changing all of that. And if I say, give me back to the current scenario, it changes it back. So I can either double click on each one, or I can say show on each one. All right? Now let's add a worst case scenario. So again, here you might want to say, describe what's the worst case. For instance, that the rent increased or whatever. You could put in the information. And by changing what cells, and again, I can indicate any and all of these cells that I might want to change. I don't have to do that. I don't have to change them all. And here it lists them all of the cells in the C column and in the F column, and indicate what happened. So let's say, oh, my salaries, I had to pay more money for salaries. That was one change I had to make. My rent went up. I had to make that change. Let's say my office expenses went up, and my liability insurance went through the roof. All right, and then what resulted here is, I don't know, maybe Canadian went up a little bit, but we took a hit in Great Britain, and that went down, and the U.S. Also went down, just to make it a really worst case. I'm not doing well here. And I say, okay, and so now I have a worst case scenario. And if I show that, you can see that things went south, and if I go to best case or if I go to current. So I can compare things very readily from one to another. And notice I can add anytime I want. I can delete any of these scenarios. I can edit the scenarios. Or I can create a summary of the scenarios, which is a very interesting feature because it creates automatically an additional spreadsheet and shows you that it compares the different scenarios at one time. So I'm going to click on Summary. Scenario summary, and result cells. What's important to me? Well, the profit, but also the expenses and the revenue, because these are all of the cells that depend on those figures in my expense and revenue listing. And when I say, okay, here's the additional scenario summary sheet. This was our original sheet. This is the one it now created. Here's our current values, our best case, our worst case. Here are the resulting cells for the profit, expenses, and revenues. But what's wrong with this picture is that they're all based on these cell addresses, which if you did this a week ago, you probably wouldn't know what refers to what cell. And if you were showing it to somebody else, they certainly wouldn't know. So I'm going to show you a way to get those cells all to be named. So I'm going to delete this sheet because we're going to have to recreate it. And we're back in our original. And we're going to use the range name feature in order to name each of these cells that are important to us with the text that's to the left. So this will be named profit, this will be named total revenue, this will be named Australia, etc. And that's very simple to do because in your Formulas tab, you have a name area, define names, and if I say Create from Selection, each cell is named by the cell to its left. It knows it's the left column. And so I'll say OK. So now, if I click Oh, my formula bar is not showing. Okay, if I clicked in my name box, you'd see all those names, but for some reason the formula bar is not showing here. Okay, so now I'm going to say from Scenario Manager, I'm going to say, give me a summary. And it's the same resulting cells as I said before. When I say, okay, here is my scenario summary, it's recreated it, but notice everything has a name. And it is named with the item next to it. So this is very understandable, very easy to do. If I had made comments on what best case and worst case means, notice there's an outline feature here. It would have listed what those comments were, but I didn't take the time to type in comments. And if I simply want to see the results, I can use the collapse, the minus to collapse, and just see the results. So this is pretty interesting. I can either show them one at a time over here, and another helpful way to use this is to put these scenarios on your quick access toolbar. So if I go to the drop-down on my quick access toolbar and go to more commands, you're not going to see scenarios on the popular commands. It would be in the S's. But if I say all commands and I scroll down to the S's, lots and lots of commands now. Here is scenario. And you can also say Scenario Manager, but we have that drop down on here, so I'm not going to bother. Say OK. And notice, here are my scenarios. Best case, whoops, worst case, OK, current info. So I can have the scenarios listed here, so it would drop down the scenarios that I have for my current file. And I can have my what if analysis drop down so I can get to my Scenario Manager. Or you can do that on your Data tab. Anybody have any questions that they want to ask? You can type that into the chat.
So this is great, Ronnie. I mean, it's like we all know how powerful Microsoft Excel is, and this is a great example of how powerful it really is.
Yeah, and believe me, 99 people out of 100 have no clue that this is even in Excel.
Well, I didn't.
There's all sorts of stuff in here that I'm sure there's plenty of stuff in here that I don't know about. I mean, it's amazing. It's such a rich program.
So we will be sharing this information with you, the video. So since we don't have any questions, we thank you for joining us today, and we will be coming out with another one next month.
Yes, we're going to do on March 1st. We're going to do a PowerPoint presentation webinar.
Great.
So stay tuned. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.